Good morning. So let's prefix this one with this is going to be an interesting one. That way there. I ran a long way yesterday, and so my legs are very much in pain. So the majority of stretches we're going to be doing today are floor based, and they're also going to be leg based as well. But that's fine. Oh, hang on a second. Let's prefix this one with this is going to be an interesting one. There we go. Okay, so just had to turn the sound off the laptop there. So yeah, did lots and lots of running yesterday, so my legs are in absolute tatters today. So we're going to pay lots and lots of attention to the legs today. So as always, it's only 30 minutes. It's just a bunch of easy stretching you can do, and whether you are doing this live on the Facebook, or which more people seem to do is on the YouTubes, it's all there for you for a good old stretch. Now the way I'm positioned today is I'm doing all the stretches not only on the floor, or the majority of them on the floor, but also leant up against the wall as well. So the reason why I'm leant up against the wall today is just for posture reasons. Okay, so when you do a lot of free stretching away from kind of good back support, not only are you putting the stretch on your legs, but also you're having to support your entire posture. So sometimes if you're feeling tired, lazy, or if you just don't have good upper body posture from that hip hinge upwards, sometimes it's good to get something behind you, whether it's your sofa, the wall, if you're in your bedroom, your bed, something along those lines. And what you can do is you can sit up flush against the wall and put your back in a really good supportive position so that you can get more out of your stretches and on your legs. And you can really see a much better idea of your range of motion. Certainly you can see just there from my seated position, this is me slightly slouched and how open my hips are here, versus when I've got good posture on, suddenly my knees are up a little bit higher. Okay, so all these kind of things, like I say, the majority of the things I'll be doing will be up against the wall today and kind of on the floor. So nice and easy, let's get started. Okay, so a nice little bit of movement for all of our moves before we actually sit into them full stop. So we're just going to start with the legs straight out in front of us, just slightly open from there. And like I say, one of the things you'll have to fight if you're up against the wall is your posture. Your back will slip down, your bum will slip forward, those kinds of things. So if you do feel yourself in your lower back and all those kinds of things lose contact with the wall, shuffle your bum back towards the wall to reposition yourself. So the legs are just a tiny little bit apart to start with, and just a nice little rocking from side to side is what we're starting with today. So there's this massive muscle in our back, which is very much responsible for a lot of the tightness in your lower back, which can adversely affect kind of pain there, and also down into your glutes, depending on connections and those kinds of things, the QR. And so what we're going to look at first is just a nice little stretch to get into to kind of give this stretch, this back muscle a bit of a stretch. So we've done a little bit of movement back side to side. Let's do a little bit of movement forward to back as well. So it's a slight little hip hinge movement going in there. And once again, with these movements where we've got a wall behind us, if we ever need to get more into the stretch, you've got the wall behind you to give yourself a little push on as well. So just remember, on every movement that we do, it's all about mild discomfort through muscles. We're not looking for any pain, especially in the joints themselves. Okay, and a few little circles then as well. One way, and then a few the other way as well. So mild discomfort is all you're looking for within the muscles themselves, and depending on obviously how tight you are and those kinds of things, how your body is developed will depend on how kind of far you can take each range of motion. I almost 100% guarantee I'm going to be able to barely take anything through after the running yesterday. So first things first, let's take those legs just slightly wider, reposition that bum in place, and all we're going to do is we're just going to lean fully to one side as far as you can. Now Ideally, let's try and get our forearm to the floor as a kind of a starting point. There we go. So I've got my shoulder blades still in contact with the wall. I've got my arm on the floor, my forearm as well. So right now I've got stretches going on in multiple areas. I've got it going on in my hamstring. I've got it underneath the thigh just down here. I've got it going into my QR, with nice big back muscle at the back here. I've also got it, and it feels a little bit horrendous to be honest. I've got a little bit in my my glute on this side as well, but I think that's more about engagement than it is about stretching at the moment. So if you want to take it further, obviously you can stretch on out and bring your bend even further down if you've got it in you. Anytime you're trying to take a stretch a little bit further, thoroughly recommend taking a deep breath in, and then as you breathe out, that's when you should be kind of pushing it a little bit further, especially if you're really challenging that range of motion. Nice big breath, and then on the exhale, take it that little step further. Remember, we're trying to keep those glutes, those butt cheeks straight down on the floor the entire time. The other thing you'll notice with, I've just noticed as well as myself, is when I'm pushing myself further, I've just moved my head. I haven't moved my body at all. So remember, shoulder blades on the wall, and it's driving the shoulder down, not the head down as well. Great stuff. And we're going to go all the way up. If your butt cheeks have come away from the wall, reposition yourself, and then we'll take ourselves the opposite way again. So we're just driving ourselves. Oh, I've got a socket there. Driving ourselves down the wall. We're taking that forearm to the floor to start with, forcing both our butt cheeks, especially that far side butt cheek, to the floor, keeping that down from there. So we've reversed the stretch now. It's much more in the hamstring on the opposite side. It's much more in the QR on the other side as well. So not only if we're keeping our shoulders flush and our butt back against the wall, can we increase the stretch by taking ourselves further out here, by opening up your shoulder over the top as well. We can bring in a lot more up the side and up the back as well into this as well. Once again, it's a super lazy stretch, this one, that pays absolute dividends for you, especially if you've got a lot of impact through the spine, through daily movements. Maybe you're a cyclist and you've gone out for a big 100k. You know, you spent yourself in that horrendous position, bent over your bars. It's good to get a bit of decompression on the spine. Maybe you're a runner that's gone out for a very long run, lots and lots of steps. My run apparently yesterday had 87,000 steps involved. And then back up again from there. Okay, so we're maintaining those legs straight out to our sides, okay? At this point, because we've done a bit of stretching on both sides, you might find especially that we've got to come a little bit more comfortable with it. So it's not as kind of feeling like a stretch like it was to begin with. So you can just take those legs a little bit further apart. Try and keep the toes, even though you can't barely see mine. You want to try and keep those toes facing straight up to the sky as much as you can. And the first thing we're going to do is take ourselves forward now. Okay, so we're trying to fold at the hip with our range of motion before we bend on over the back. So let's pretend this is our hips and our legs would be here. You're folding, good posture the entire time. At some point you're not going to be able to go any further, and that's when you bend the back and come on down as well. You've got the wall behind you to give yourself a little bit of a push if you want to. Like I'm doing right here, because I have absolutely no range of motion right now. I'm very, very tight. But you should be able to feel this directly on the back of the thighs from there. You might be driving your forearms into the floor and forward. Big deep breaths, taking it further. You may even, if you're super stretchy, depending on where you are super stretchy, even your head might be on the floor now as well. I've seen it once in one of my classes and it blew me away. Okay, and we're back on up. Let's go ahead and bring the one foot either side, and you're just going to bring it all the way into the thigh and flatten that knee onto the floor. And then we're going to bend on over towards the toe that's sticking up at the moment, okay? So we want one hand either side of the leg as we drive on out as far as you can. If you're like me right now, you've got the wall behind you to push on as well, or if you can take yourself down quite easily, that's what you want to do. There we go. So we're pushing on into it. Remember, we should be feeling this on the legs, on the muscles themselves. So we've got a little bit on the hamstring, so the backs of the thighs here. Depending on how aggressively you're attacking that toe, if you're pushing the toes back and the heel forward, you might feel it on the calf muscle as well. If you feel anything in the knee area, one of the things you want to do is get it away from the knee area. We don't want to stretch out the ligaments or the tendons or anything in the knee. The knee is a structure, what's in there is developed to keep the knee together, keep the leg bones together, those kinds of things. So we don't want those getting looser. So if you feel anything in the knee area itself, then with a slight little knee bend like that, we can take a little bit of movement, extra movement in the stretch, but also take it away from the knee. Okay, let's go ahead and take ourselves over to the other side. So we'll reset that other leg straight out. Bring that leg on in. We've got the sole of your foot up against your thigh. You're trying to keep, once again, both butt cheeks on the floor, trying to keep this knee on the floor as well. And we're trying to fold our way over to that opposite foot. Something that I cannot do right now. But that's okay. Everybody's range of motion is going to be different, depending on what you did yesterday, depending on what you've done the last year of your life, those kinds of things. All you need to do is be pushing into the muscle, feeling it on the muscle for your range of motion today. Both butt cheeks are on the floor, knees on the floor. Maybe you take a big, deep breath in and then just extend that stretch a little bit further. And this is the great beauty of having the wall behind you, because if this was off the wall and you're in the middle of a room or something like that, I wouldn't be able to get as much stretch in right now on this one. Right now I'm using the wall to push myself into it, to really bring it onto the back of the muscle. Good stuff. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and bring our feet together in the middle. Sole to sole. Maybe you've had to reset your bum against the wall again. They're going to meet basically in the middle. And good posture, shoulder blades against the wall, nice and easy. We're just pushing the knees down. Feel the hips opening up from there. So you're just putting a little bit of weight on the knees, pushing them away from each other. A little bit at a time. And you'll feel this tremendous kind of stretch in here. In a couple of places, depending on where you're tight. Maybe your hip flexors are super tight, and you can feel it kind of almost in the connection between where you feel like your thighs and your pelvis would be. So maybe you feel this tremendous thing here. Maybe you feel a little stretch in the tops of your thighs. So wherever you're tightest will depend on where you feel it. But we're just pushing it down. Remember to take those deep breaths to take yourself a little bit further every time as well. Lovely stuff. Okay, let's cross our legs straight in front of us. And just like that side to side stretch that we did with the the QR muscle, I can never remember the full name. QR, it works. We're going to take ourselves forward towards our forearms. So we took ourselves to the side of the forearms, but we're aiming for forearms forward on the floor. Okay, so just like earlier when it was a fold, before you round that back off, same thing here. Hip is going to fold, good posture as far as your range of motion is going to go. And then that's when you bring the bend into it as well. So we're just going forward as far with good posture as we can before we fold on over. Aiming for those forearms on the floor if you can get them there. If you can't, that's not to worry, whatever your range of motion is for you today. As you can see, I am getting nowhere near. Now, depending once again how flexible you are, how tight you are, your activities you've done. You might find this in your glute. This might come on quite heavily on the glute, on the leg which is in front during the cross. You might find it a little bit in the hamstring as well, and your lower back as well. So there's a whole bunch of different areas you might feel it. Take that big deep breath. Take that a little bit further as well. And then what we're going to do in a moment is we're just going to uncross the legs and then recross them on the opposite way round. So it's the other leg forward. There we go. Great stuff. And then we just go through that again. So it's the same stretch, but it's for the opposite way round. So you should have different connections and different kind of stretch points. So off we go. There you go. So you're taking yourself forward. Maybe you're feeling it in the hip flexors, in the glutes. And the strange thing about stretching is it's just about feeling comfortable in the kind of the uncomfortable positions. That's why we're trying to get ourselves is to uncomfortable positions. Not terribly painful, but certainly like you know something's going on. And it's kind of like, I want to stop doing this, but I'm going to hold it for a little bit. That's the kind of pain it should be. You got loads of different, obviously, kinds of pains. Like if you got stabbed, the first thing you're going to do is pull yourself away and get away from that pain, a kind of stabbing pain from there. You've got pain like someone who's pinching you, let's say, and it's like, oh, that hurts, but that's kind of annoying. I don't like that, but and that's the kind of how your stretching should feel. It should be like, oh, that's kind of painful, that's kind of annoying, but I can hold it and deal with it for a little bit. So it needs to be in that mild discomfort area. There we go, good. Okay. So let's give ourselves a little bit of attention on the quad muscles next. Those are big, powerful muscles on the tops of your legs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to set ourselves in a good position where we can do a stretch for it. Okay, we are going to try our best to stay on the floor, sorry. Okay, so let's pop ourselves up. And then down onto the floor. Okay, nice and steady. Now what we're looking to do is the only thing that we want to be grabbing right now is our toe. Okay, try and keep your hips into the floor. Try and just relax the upper body and all those kinds of things. And let's just go ahead, reach back and grab that ankle. Okay, and you're trying to keep your hips on the floor, remember. So almost like you're driving your hips, both of them directly into the floor, and also keeping this ankle up as far as you can towards the bum, okay? So this is the offensive lineman stretch. And by that, usually on American football teams, you have a look around during cool downs and stretching, and everybody's doing this stretch stood up, and the offensive linemen are doing it lying down on the floor because they're lazy. So keep forcing those hips down towards the floor. Try not to pick the thigh off the floor either, the one we're stretching, the quad, okay? But really try and push that hip into the floor as best as you can. And then let's go ahead and relax that one and then do the same for the other leg as well. So remember, hips are off the floor. Trying to keep both shoulders on the floor as well, both hips and shoulders on the floor. Pulling that quad, stretching it all out. Those quads are beautiful pushing muscles. So if you think about everyday life, what's the one thing our body's doing? Well, it's pushing us away from gravity. So those muscles are incredibly powerful because they keep you from being splattered against the floor, and they're always being used. And if you think about any kind of situation in your everyday life when you take yourself up, so up hills, upstairs, up ladders or anything like that, your quads are super working at getting your body weight up, 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 up. Okay, good. So what we're going to do next, put a bit of a twist in. I'm going to ask you to take one of your legs. It's your dealer's choice to start with. A little bit of a twist in, and I'm going to ask you to take it and put it over the back of the opposite leg. So for the most part, try and keep your, let's say, your left arm on the floor. That forearm as your left leg goes all the way over the back to the opposite side. The right leg is nice and flush on the floor. You're up on your right shoulder. Try and get that left foot flat on the floor from there. If you want to take it a step further, that right hand that's on the floor, you can also bring into the quad stretch as well. But really just try and keep that left forearm on the floor, that right shoulder on the floor, the right hip on the floor as you step on over to the opposite side. So you've got a stretch here in your quads if you're grabbing the foot. There's a bit in your hip flexors again. We've got a good twist in the core as well. And then release it all. And then obviously we're going to go ahead and do it on the opposite side as well. So this time you're taking, if you followed me last time, you're taking that right leg all the way over the back. Try and keep this arm flat on the floor, the forearm. If you find you get to this twist position and there's not a lot of stretch in it, and not a lot of intensity for you, that's when you want to take the arm that's on the floor, that left arm, and grab the foot and take the quad stretch as well. Because then by forcing this forearm on the floor and pulling that foot backwards, as you can see I'm attached here, you get a little bit of a twist in and you get a little bit more intensity on the quad as well. Lovely. Okay. A couple more then. Let's look at those calf muscles. That's these beautiful muscles at the back. Let's pedal them out to start with. So we're in a tabletop position. We've got active toes flat on the floor, and all we're looking to do is stand up and stretch one out. Just a little bit of movement at a time. Just pedaling them through. Quick on and off on each foot. So there's a slight engagement. Each engagement's getting a little bit longer every time. Just forcing that heel to the floor. And then let's just go straight in. Double heels into the floor from there. Calf muscles, once again, massively underappreciated in fitness. I know a lot of my runners won't stretch their calves or anything like that. They're another pushing muscle responsible for some very explosive movements and can get very tight and lead to a lot of problems in the ankle area and in the knee area as well on those connection points. And I would go as far as to say, of all the different muscles that you can stretch, it's possibly one of the most painful ones to stretch as well, because you can get your whole body weight through them and really intensify the stretch quite considerably. There we go. Okay, good. Last couple then. So we're just going to go and sit on back on our legs as my head disappears. Feet are flat on the floor. Posture is just flat on the floor. And we just got a bit of an ankle stretch going on there. These last two, once again, I do these almost every week in this class. They're super important, I think, to help the structure of the foot, help fight plantar fasciitis and those kinds of things. They're super painful, at least they can be to start with. But this is where you have to kind of spend some time to develop the stretches themselves. And then you become a little bit more kind of comfortable in those positions. So from this position, now we've got a nice long stretch. We're going to go up onto our toes. 1, 2, up onto the toes. And then just return to that seating over the top position again. Stretching out the sole of that foot as well. One of the other things whilst we're here is I really recommend whether you lift weights, whether you do any kind of intensive exercise, running, cycling, where you take yourselves to those kind of really kind of intense sections. Really try and not use your toes and scrunch them all up, okay? Because all you're doing in those situations is using a bunch of muscles that you have no need to be using for that movement. It's just a little bit too intense, of an intensity that you don't need to use. And especially if you don't stretch your feet out or anything like that, it's just a whole bunch of scrunching them up, not doing anything. You can cause some kind of tightness in the foot itself. Let's just go back one more time to the feet flat on the floor. Da, 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 da. Alright, lovely stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on what can only be described as my most painful stretching day of the year. Everything was on the floor because I'm lazy today, because I ran far too many miles yesterday and I don't really have a lot of range of motion. So this is the other important thing to remember, is just because one day your range of motion is certainly one way, the next time you try to stretch and those kinds of things, you might find drastic changes in your range of motion. So always do whatever, challenge your range of motion for the day that you're stretching, okay? So don't try and be like, oh, I could have done this yesterday, but I can't do it today. I'm going to force myself into it. Find that mild discomfort in the muscle. Push yourself into mild discomfort and don't worry about kind of anything else like that. Have a great week. Any questions, pop them somewhere on the internet. Like the video, share the video, or if you're watching on YouTube, like or subscribe. Have a good week. Oh. And high five.